Very cool. Well, I'm excited to be with you guys and to be able to do this training today. I've been training motivational interviewing, been a trainer for motivational interviewing for about 15 years. I absolutely love motivational interviewing. It's fantastic. I get hyped about it just because it's so, once you get in the rhythm of things, it just becomes a second language and you just understand like the benefits of doing it more than a dozen times. In the last 15 years, I've had somebody come to me and tell me, you would never believe what this has done to my relationship with my spouse. Because it changes the way that you can talk to folks that you love. It changes the way that you ask questions. It's fantastic. So if you would like to chat with me offline, you're more than welcome to. If you're looking for other kind of training with your organization or anything else, I'm happy to help you or get you to the right spot. So we're going to just jump right into it and get started. One of the first things that I usually pop up on the screen is this quote by Marcus Aurelius says, "Everything we hear is an opinion, not a fact. Everything that we see is a perspective, not the truth." The reason I say that is because you're going to, if you ever do another motivational interviewing training, hopefully you see that everything kind of it all lines up. But I might have something in here that's opinion, and just don't hate me if you don't hear it again from somebody else. That's kind of the reason that that slide exists. Love this graphic. I think this is fantastic. Do your sessions or your interactions with your clients look more like wrestling or more like dancing? And when we think about our interactions with people, no matter what it is that you're doing, if you're in the people business, you have interactions with folks. Do those interactions with people look like wrestling or look like dancing? And I'll open it up for just a couple of comments. What do you see about the synergy or about the energy or about what's going on between the picture on the left and the picture on the right? What do you just notice right away with that partnership, those partnerships?
I think, Deborah, I think the first one with the wrestlers, it's by force and demand, and kind of like because I told you to do it, do it. And the one with the dancing, I see freestyle. Um, let's figure it out and let's make it happen.
Yeah, beautiful summation. That's perfect. Yeah, exactly. We see this thing on the left where there's a clear winner and a clear loser. We don't have to be in the wrestling business to understand who's at the disadvantage in that one, right? We can just take a look at that picture and know we know who's going to win this one. It's the guy with the great haircut, right? He's the one that's going to get he's going to win this one. And the one on the right, we see people smiling, we see people dancing, they're in unison with each other. They're moving to this, to whatever. We assume that there's music in the background. They're having a good time, it looks like. And when we think about this in direct relationship with the people that we work with, uh, we can wrestle or we can dance. And sometimes it's necessary to do a little bit more wrestling than dancing. But the idea is that it's going to be much easier on our folks that we work with and on us if we're dancing as opposed to wrestling. Who wants to go home at the end of an 8 hour day knowing that you had 8 sessions with people that look like wrestling? You're going to be tired and beat up. If all of your sessions, interactions with people look like you're dancing, it's going to be a much easier life, much easier work life, and you'll be much happier when you get off of work. I feel the same way about when we're supervising people, right? So I have not been providing direct services for a number of years now, but I do a lot of supervision, and when I supervise people, I want to make it that I'm coming alongside of them, I'm helping them, I'm developing them, as opposed to pushing them, as opposed to wrestling with them. So put in another way, are we pushing our clients more than we're walking beside them? This is a graphic that I got right off of old Google, like a clip art. And it really sums up how we work with some of the people that we work with. And some of us have I don't remember who the person was that talked about drug court or yeah, the judge that worked in drug court. But a lot of those clients that were mandated are really resistant clients. And it feels like we're pushing them. And you see the person in the front with their heels dug in and leaning back. Could it be harder to push them, right? There's no way it would be harder unless they were holding a weight. And the person in the front's got his palms on their shoulder and they're pushing from their tiptoes. It looks like it's just the hardest way to push. And that graphic really kind of sums up how some of the interactions with people can end up looking like. So motivational interviewing was first developed by Dr. Miller and Dr. Rolnick. Dr. Rolnick is from Australia, and Dr. Miller is from Arizona. And that snazzy little bolo tie that he's got on there, he always has on a bolo tie just like that. I had the pleasure of being on stage with him at a conference in Arizona, and I nerded out, got his autograph and pictures. It was pretty cool. I liked it. He thought it was kind of weird, but I liked it. We got the chance to speak on motivational interviewing. I felt like that was a really great moment in time. Motivational interviewing was first developed in 1993, or 1983, excuse me, and first came to publication in 1991. And we think about what was going on in the late 70s, early 80s, with respect to the counseling world, with respect to drug and alcohol treatment, there wasn't a lot of different modalities of like therapeutic orientations on the scene. You had a lot of 12-step stuff. So drug and alcohol treatment looked a lot like 12-step meetings. And you had some cognitive behavioral therapy, which had been around for a really long time. And then there were some other select ones in there that had been around for a long time as well. The problem with those therapies, we could spend hours and hours talking about those various therapies, but the problem with those various therapies that were used is that it could take months and months to get to something substantive. So you could actually be working with somebody for a long time before you get to the part where you're doing some interventions that's going to help them in their day-to-day life. Most of it had to do with getting to know the person, going back into this long history, trying to figure out what the problem was. And it was really primarily based in the problems with the person, right? Because we don't seek help in this country unless there's a problem. So we pathologize people, right? We say, this is what the issue is. This is what the problem is. Insurance companies only want to pay when there's a problem with somebody. We don't go to counseling when things are going great. But that's a great time to go to counseling, right? When things are going great. We don't normalize that in our society. So what motivational interviewing did was it gave us the opportunity to start working with somebody today and start giving them interventions today that's going to help their lives today. And it was a fantastic option on the scene. It just took off. At first, it was used with folks that had substance use disorder, and it has moved just through every single people business layer that there is. So you see dietitians using it. You see folks that are in hospital settings using it. There's just all sorts of ways that you can use it because of its wide range and how applicable it is. So it was based on what's called the trans-theoretical model or the stages of change model. Most everybody's kind of heard of this at some point in time. You have pre-contemplation, contemplation, preparation, action, and maintenance. Those are the stages of change. The stages of change were around a lot longer. They were by Prochaska and DiClemente. They'd been around much longer than motivational interviewing, but this was very much based in that. So if we're not talking about substance use disorder for a second, let's just talk about somebody that wants to eat right or start going to the gym. At what point in time does a person make the decision, hey, my life is unhealthy and I need to start going to the gym? Usually it's at a doctor's office. The doctor says you've got some cholesterol problems or you've got some issues with your weight. There's something that's a nudge, right? There's some kind of a nudge to them that says, I got to do something different. I look back at my life and what it was is I'm a later parent. I'm 50 years old and I have a 6-year-old and a 2-year-old. And when I was getting down on the ground to play with my 6-year-old when she was much younger, I was out of breath standing up. And I thought, I got to do something about this. We can't do this anymore. There is the pre-contemplative to contemplative moment, right? We think about people that are in pre-contemplation. They're really not aware that there's an issue or a problem. Those are the ones that we see that are most of the time are mandated to be in some kind of treatment program or mandated to be in drug court. The contemplative moment is when I stood up, was out of breath, and was like, I got to lose some weight. So I go to the doctor, I talk to the doctor about some options, and I had some chronic back issues. And he said, and I quote, your problems would go away if you would reverse the weight gain. And I thought that is the nicest way of someone telling me I was fat that there ever was. That's fantastic. I got to remember that. Reverse the weight gain. And I already knew that, which was the reason I was there. But me going to the doctor was the preparation stage. Me going to the doctor was how I was preparing those things for and looking into a gym membership, right? Maybe buying an elliptical that would turn out to be a clothes rack at some point in time. When I actually start going to the gym or when I actually start on the elliptical or I actually start doing those things, then I'm in the action stage, right? But we know that habits take a while to develop. So me going to the gym 5 days in a row doesn't put me in maintenance. Me going to the gym for 6 months in a row puts me in maintenance, right? Puts me in that stage where it's become a habit. With drug and alcohol, substance use disorders, we tend to think of things around 6 to 18 months. That's when the things finally start leaving your system. That's when that protracted withdrawal finally is gone. We think of maintenance as 6 to 18 months, right? But stuff like going to the gym or starting to eat right might be a little bit longer before you're in that maintenance stage. But no matter who it is, any decision that you've ever had to make in your life involved ambivalence. I want to change. I don't want to change. I would love to eat right, but I love those little powdered sugar donuts with a raspberry filling that are terrible for you, that have a shelf life of 20 years, right? They're not good for you. I love them. I can't pass them without wanting one. So I'm ambivalent about that change. Is there a way that I can do some extra exercise so I can still eat the raspberry donuts? I'm going through all of those things in my head, right? That's the ambivalence. Now, for many, many years, counselors in general thought of ambivalence as something bad. Ambivalence meant that you weren't serious about your change. Ambivalence meant that you didn't want to quit using drugs or that you weren't serious about taking your mental health medication. Ambivalence is good. Ambivalence is normal. There's not a human on the planet that ever made change without ambivalence. So when somebody is being resistant or somebody is not participating, I look at it that they're doing their job. They're right where they need to be. And when you do that, it sort of depersonalizes things and it makes it much more like dancing than wrestling. If I look at it, they're being obstinate and I have to push them, then it's always a wrestling match. I worked in residential treatment for a long time, and I was always amazed when the supervisors or the directors would kick somebody out for using drugs. I thought, we're in a residential program. That's what they're here for. All that does to me is it tells me they're in the right spot. They're right where they need to be. And I think about it in terms of if you were diabetic and you forgot to take your medication, the doctor wouldn't say, sorry, we can't see you anymore. The doctor would try to figure out to do something different. Maybe she would give you different options, or she would remind you of something different, something to get you to be more proactive, maybe in taking your medication, but they wouldn't tell you to leave. They wouldn't refuse services to you. But for some odd reason, in treatment, as soon as somebody does something that just qualifies them to be there even more, they get asked to leave. So we think of this ambivalence as something that is really good. Ambivalence is not bad. In fact, I love it when people start expressing ambivalence because of the fact that it shows that they're being really honest. I don't think I've ever had a client walk into my office, sit in front of me, and goes, today's the day, anything you say, I'll do it. It never works out like that. There's always this push and pull. There's always this push and pull. And so when you start viewing that ambivalence as it's a good thing and not a bad thing, it's fantastic. So on the illustration on the right-hand side of the screen, can you see my cursor? The little arrow. Okay. Pre-contemplation, no intention on changing behavior. Contemplation, aware a problem exists, but no commitment to action. Preparation, intent on taking action to address the problem. Action, active modification of behavior. Maintenance, sustained change. New behavior replaces old behavior. Then you have this relapse. Relapse, fall back into old patterns of behavior. And this is directly out of a textbook. And I didn't like this at all. Because what this appears like is that this is part of the wheel, that you must relapse in order to be in this correct stage of change. I didn't like that at all. So when I was in my PhD program doing my dissertation, I wrote this one over here on the left, which has, and you can't see it. Well, I'll tell you about it. This is regression. This arrow over here is regression, and this one over here is progression. Instead of looking at it like relapse has to be part of it, anytime that you're on this side of it, you're regressing. Anytime you're on this side of it, you're progressing. It just worked out, to me in my head, it worked out much better. And these directional arrows going back and forth says that at any point in time, you can jump back into preparation if you mess up. At any point in time, you can jump back into contemplation if you mess up. But when you're in this pre-contemplative state, we expect the behavior to continue happening. So there's really not a way to jump back into it. You kind of have to start from this pre-contemplative state and work your way forward. So I hope this helps a little bit in thinking about. I'm sorry.
What's up? Yep, they're here.
JW Hunter, I think, just needs to mute his mic.
Just go to the front desk.
Okay, so why am I? We talked about this just a little bit a second ago. The gaps that were filled using motivational interviewing became an overnight success because all of a sudden people could start using this and giving folks stuff that they need today to make their life change today. The other thing that was great is that you had to have extensive training, maybe a special certification or degree programs in certain modalities of treatment. With motivational interviewing, it's just a basic training, and you get the idea and the concept, and you can start changing the way that you talk to people. So you didn't have to be a counselor, you didn't have to have a master's or a doctorate or be a licensed in anything. The entire team approach, if you're thinking about putting this to use in your agency or to the people that you work with, it's really important that the whole entire agency, everybody who would come into contact with that client is on the same page. It's actually kind of dangerous when you think about you being the one that knows about motivational interviewing. People come to you and they expect a certain way of talking now that they got to know you, and then they speak to somebody else and it doesn't work out that way for them. It's really great to have everybody on that same page. And that's fidelity to the model too, right? If you have everybody trained and everybody's working off the same sheet of music, it makes things work a lot better. So getting people trained is key. It doesn't, like I said, it doesn't have to be a super extensive training. We're going to put about today is going to be like getting a small drink of water through a fire hose. We're going to have a lot of information in an hour, maybe a little longer than an hour. But you can stretch on a training, motivational interviewing training for 2 days. You can do a day's worth of training, a 4 hour, a 6 hour, 8 hour training. But for the agency, it's really, really great to have everybody sort of playing on the same sheet of music. Motivational interviewing, if you want to just define it, is a way of structuring conversations to elicit change talk. The goal of motivational interviewing is to help people explore and resolve ambivalence. So it's a way of structuring our conversation to elicit change talk. It's very person-centered, it's strength-based, goal-oriented, and solution-focused. So instead of diving into problems with the person, I'm going to dive into solutions immediately. I want to find out about what's kept people resilient, the protective factors that they have in their lives. Everybody knows about problems. The client that you're working with is an expert in their problems. But a lot of times people don't know the solutions. In fact, most times they don't know the solution. And one of the things that's talked about in motivational interviewing text is that you have the person with the best solutions in their life sitting right in front of you. You just have to help them explore it. Ambivalence is common and to be expected. You're going to hear this multiple times throughout the presentation. Ambivalence is dealt with by eliciting intrinsic motivation. So we dig really deep and try to figure out where that motivation is. Many, many times in my career, somebody said, oh, the cops are making me be here. The judge is making me be here. They've got somebody that's nudging them to be there. And I let them know, hey, I don't see any handcuffs on you. Like, well, no, I don't have any handcuffs on me. Well, you got here, didn't you? Well, yeah. Well, why did you get here? Well, because my freedom is important. All right. So there's a motivator there, right? It's not just the judge that's sending you here. The judge sends 1,000 people to treatment in the course of a month. Maybe 16 show up. So there's motivation on your part to sit in my chair today. You have to commend yourself for showing up. Congratulations on making a good decision in your life. The judge didn't drive you here. They're not sitting outside of my office door. You drove yourself here. So even at that most basic thing, we can find where that protective factor is, where that resilience is, where that motivator is. People that use MI empower clients to move towards the desired change talk. And we're going to talk about that quite extensively. You hear change talk repeatedly. When you think about it, there are two possible responses from people when you ask questions. There's change talk or sustain talk. One response moves people forward. One response keeps people stuck or moving backwards. They don't need any help being stuck. None of us need help being stuck. We need help moving forward. And that's where the difference between change talk and sustain talk comes in. And we're going to learn about how to phrase questions better and how to really draw that change talk out of somebody. So here's a couple of things I stole right off the internet. Rule, you're going to hear a lot of acronyms today. The first one is rule. Resist the writing reflex, understand the person's motivation, listen with empathy, and empower the patient or empower the person. So this is the rule of motivational interviewing. Does anybody know what the writing reflex is? The writing reflex we borrow from our friends in the veterinary practices. So veterinarians, this term is used in veterinary science. If you have a cat and you have the cat on its back, you're holding it upside down, its paws are towards the ceiling, and you moved your hands out of the way real quick, what would happen to the cat? It'd land on its feet every single time. It will always land on its feet. And they say no matter how high you go up, the cat will all automatically move to its feet. That's the righting reflex. You can't say the same thing about dogs. Dogs won't do that. But cats do. Cats do that. That's the righting reflex. And they use that on purpose because they want to show how just indoctrinated we are to correct people's problems. When there's somebody sitting in front of us and we can see loud and clear what the problem is, we want to be like, no, 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 here's the problem. All you got to do is stop drinking. I've had clients before me that sit before at my desk that had 10 DUIs and they can't tell you why their life is in disarray. I got an idea. In fact, I have 10 of them. I know exactly why you have a problem, right? But that's not helping anybody. We have to get them to arrive at that. Even with 10 DUIs, the person's still like, I don't understand why my life is a problem. Well, I can help with that. There's 10 really good reasons why. When we dig deep, we can figure out what those motivations are. We can figure out exactly where the person's motivations lie and why they're here in the first place. Listening with empathy is super important. No matter who you're dealing with, folks can tell if it's fake or not. Everybody knows it. It doesn't matter if you're talking to a friend or to a client or people we work with in any capacity. If you're faking the funk, people see it, people know it. And ultimately, the goal of our interactions with people is to empower them to be able to do this on their own. We empower people to make their own decisions. We empower people to live a better life. And we move away from this, like you got to have help constantly, to this place of you're going to be empowered to be able to make these decisions on your own. So like I said, this is just one of the very first acronyms today. This is the rule. The most difficult part for people using MI consistently is the righting reflex. That's the first one. These are in order. The desire for the person to correct or right the behavior of the individual. The blaming trap. The blaming trap in the motivational interviewing text, it talks about how certain professions are more likely to focus on the blame or the cause of the problem. Instead of talking about what we can do to fix the problem or ways that we can empower you to fix the problem, instead I'm going to focus on you're getting DUIs all the time. This is the problem. This is the reason this is the problem. When we should be focusing on ways to get them out of the problem. The chat trap. The chat trap is excessive chat where we're not really ever getting to the actual problem. I had a professor that called it the prosthetic leg theory. And I was like, that's interesting. Tell me about it. And he said that he had a client early on. He was doing an intake, and the client told him about the prosthetic leg that he had. And they got into the details of the prosthetic leg. And 90 minutes went by, and they didn't do a single thing on the assessment. They got to chatting about that and how that happened and impacted his life. And they got not one question of the assessment done. So it's great to build that rapport. It's also something that we should be mindful of. The directing trap or the expert trap. Expert trap. I know best because I am blank. Fill in the blank. I know best because I'm the professional. You don't. We read in the text, the motivational interviewing text, that we have the expert sitting in front of us. All we have to do is help direct them. The person that's the expert in their own life is sitting directly in front of us. They know their own solutions. Even the ones that seem like they're the farthest from solution, they still know the solution. We just have to help to draw it out. Or the labeling trap. This one happens a lot more with mental health or with substance use disorder treatment. Oh, you only have that problem because you're borderline, or you only have that problem because of your depression. People are more than their diagnosis. People are more than a label. And then my favorite one to work with people on, especially in the field that I work in, is the question and answer trap. When you start getting people into the question and answer, doing assessments or intakes or psychological evaluations, you start putting them into a passive role. I'm just going to ask the question, you're going to answer it. We'll just do this back and forth thing for 90 minutes, and that becomes the immediate pattern. Clients in a passive role is not helpful to them, and it's certainly not helpful to us. Understandably, a lot of the assessments and evaluations and stuff like that have to be done. But I learned from a really great counselor how to do an assessment. And my assessments, when I'm doing them or I'm training somebody to do assessments, the client doesn't even know they're doing an assessment. It's a long conversation. We're just having a conversation. I gather the information that I need. And I feel like that's the best way to get people to come back. The next one, this is probably the most popular acronym that you will ever hear in motivational interviewing. This is your OARS: open-ended questions, affirmations, reflections, and summarize. So open-ended questions, folks tend to think of it as closed-ended, meaning a yes or no answer, right? We're asking questions that are going to get us a yes or no answer. They're not going to be really fruitful as far as our discovery into intrinsic motivation. However, I've expanded that because I work with adolescents. So if there's any question that you ask that's going to get a one-word answer, that's also a closed-ended question. So if you ask a kid that doesn't want to be in treatment how he's doing, fine. Anything going on in your life? No. It's going to end up being stuff like that. So I always try to phrase the questions in a way that you cannot possibly answer it with one word. So that's what I look at between open-ended questions and closed-ended questions. So anything that's going to get you open, any question that's going to get you something more than one word, that's a good open-ended question. Affirmations help overcome self-sabotaging or negative thoughts. High fives, fist bumps, kudos, great job showing up today. But once again, folks can tell if you're really cashing it in or if you're being authentic about that. And I believe that a person showing up on time is a huge accomplishment, especially when they have never done that before in their life. We're very worthy of a high five, very worthy of a fist bump or congratulations, right? I don't ever lack in affirmations with folks, especially with kids, especially with adolescents. They really need to hear that. They really need to hear that they did a good job with something. Reflections as a way to express ambivalence. It's also known as reflective listening. When we think of reflective listening and the way that we respond to people, we are reflecting one of two things back to them. And like 98% of our language is done in feeling or content. So when we're reflecting something back to an individual, it's going to be in feeling or content. So if I have a person sitting in front of me talking to me about all the problems of their life and they take a small breather and I want to reflect that back to them, I'm reflecting either the content that they shared or I'm reflecting the feeling or I'm reflecting both. So Scott, it sounds like that was really hard for you. It sounds like things were really hard last week. What's that make you feel like, now that you've said it out loud? I can summarize the content there, or I can just reflect the feeling, or I can reflect the content, or both. I tend to think of summarize, even though these are sort of bleed into each other, I tend to think of summarizations as a bookend. So somebody's chatting for quite a while about some terrible problem that's just happening in their life today, and they seem to be wrapping it up. I want to summarize all of what they said. So it sounds like, Emily, what you've said is that this last week was terrible. It was awful. Wish you wouldn't even have had these problems come up, but you've done a really good job. You're here. You've shown up. It seems like you want to work through this stuff, and you seem pretty motivated right now. Am I getting all that right? And the client sitting in front of you is going to tell you immediately if you're not getting it right. It never fails. No, you didn't understand me. I'm not motivated. I don't want to be here. If they're being honest with you, they're going to tell you exactly what you got wrong. And there have been times that I intentionally got it wrong so I could get more information from a person. So you seem like you're okay right now with it. No, Nick, I'm not. I'm not okay with it. Things are bad. Things are crap right now. And it's a really good way to be able to pull some additional information out of people. So examples of open-ended questions. What happened since the last time we met? What makes you think it might be time for a change? What has happened in the past when you behaved this way? I know you said you're not ready to stop using, but if you did stop using, what would your life look like? That's a great question. And you can apply that. You take that part out that says stop using and you put it with really anything. I give an example. I had a guy in a residential program I worked in really early in my career. He came in my office and he said, "I don't want to be here." And he threw his hands on the table and he yelled, "I don't want to be here." And I looked at him and I said, "If you don't want to be here, I don't want you to be here." And he was surprised because what did he expect that I was going to do when he said he didn't want to be here? He expected me to argue, to say, "You need to be here. You have to be here. You're told to be here. You've got to be here." But I said, "If you don't want to be here, I don't want you to be here. I got a box over here. You want me to help pack your stuff?" And he was shocked. So I grabbed the box. We walked to his room and he started putting his stuff in the box. And I said, "Man, I know you said you don't want to be here. I got that 100%. But I can't help but wonder, what would your life be like if you finished treatment?" And what he did was systematically told me every reason in his life that he needed to be in treatment. Gave me 9 or 10 really good reasons. And I said, "Huh, So what are you doing? He goes, I'm unpacking my stuff. He started putting his stuff back away on the shelf and handed me the box back. He made his own decision at that point in time because he heard himself say it out loud, the reasons that he needed to be there. And I knew none of those reasons. I had never met with him before. So now I have this little arsenal of reasons that I can go back to later on if he's having a hard time and saying, what about your girlfriend that said that she didn't want to be with you unless you finish treatment? What about your mom that said that you're going to have to give the key back to the house? You're not allowed, if you're continuing to use drugs, you can't be back in her house. I wouldn't have known these things had I not asked the question that way. But my normal response, the righting reflex, might have been, no, you have to be here. You know, you're mandated to be in treatment. And then we get into this push-pull, right? We're in this power dynamic, which is not helpful to anybody. We're back to wrestling. Are we at a spot where we have any questions or comments or concerns or anything? Are we doing good? Okay, great. Examples of affirmations. Your effort really shows your commitment to changing your life. You showed a lot of determination by walking away from that problem. It's clear that you're really trying to change your risky behavior. And if it doesn't sound authentic to say it that way, say it however it is that you want to. With the obstacles that you have in your life right now, it's impressive that you've been able to refrain from using drugs. You just told me about a whole stack of problems that you had this last week and you didn't use. That's remarkable. What was it? What was it that kept you clean? What was it that kept you away from this person? What was it that kept you out of trouble? Despite what happened last week, coming to the office today reflects that you're really concerned about changing stuff. It's pretty easy to do affirmations. We probably don't incorporate as much of that as we need to, and people love it. There isn't a person around that doesn't like to be told that they're doing a good job. They may not say that they like that. They might try to pretend like they don't, but everybody likes to be told that they do a good job, especially if it's authentic and real. Examples of reflective listening. What I hear you saying is you sound incredibly frustrated and feel like probation is just holding you back. On the one hand, it sounds like this. On the other hand, it sounds like this. Your situation appears to be challenging. It's understandable that you'd be so frustrated. I just want to make sure I got everything that you said. You're angry because blah, blah, blah. Getting high makes you forget about the past, but you can clearly see the damage that it's causing in your life right now. Those are really good ways to show that we're listening, especially when they're applicable and we're actually getting that message right. Another example of reflective listening or reflections. Let me stop and summarize what you just talked about. You're not sure that you want to be here, and you only came because if you didn't, you'd have some negative consequences. Did I miss anything? Did I get that right? A nice, quick, easy summarize at the same time that we are doing some reflection. Now we get into the next acronym. This is 3 of 3 so far. This is DEARS. If you've ever been to a motivational interviewing training before, it was formerly known as REDS, R-E-D-S. They added one more. So we have the 5 general principles in motivational interviewing. DEARS: develop discrepancy, express empathy, amplify ambivalence, roll with resistance, and support self-efficacy. So in the top right-hand corner of that, in the green print, it says REDS up there. So roll with resistance, express accurate empathy, develop discrepancy, support self-efficacy. They just added the A and switched it around to DEARS. So amplify ambivalence. When somebody is ambivalent about something, we want to amplify that. We want to magnify that. We want to talk about how great it is that they're discussing it. At the very bottom, there's a little footnote that says sometimes the A is avoid arguing. I've seen a lot of stuff come out of Canada, white papers on stuff that's come out of Canada from colleges, universities, and it says avoid arguing. I don't know if they just didn't get the message up there or not, but it's amplify ambivalence. But it's also not a bad thing if you don't argue too. So I just threw it in there. Like avoid arguing is not a bad notion either. So avoid arguing or amplify ambivalence are both, hopefully. So that's the DEARS. We'll go one by one with those. Develop discrepancy is one of my absolute favorites. You have on the one hand, and then on the other hand, right? You have these two conflicting ideas. Usually they're diametrically opposed to each other. So one that comes up a lot is a person is not ready to quit using drugs, but they are ready to quit changing their life, or they're ready to change their life. So how can you change your life without quitting drugs? So there's the two sides of that. There's the two opposing sides. I need to be a good father to my children, but I'm not quite ready to stop doing heroin. So the discrepancy that I'm building is I heard you say multiple times that you're ready to be a good parent to your kids and you want to get your kids back. But at the same time, you're not really ready to give up doing drugs. So how do those things work together? How can we get those things to work together? Help me build a bridge over the two of those things. Now, when we're doing that and we're using the client's words, that makes so much of a difference. They're things that they've told us, and we're just reflecting that back to them, but we're showing how those two opposing ideas usually can't live in harmony with each other. So building that discrepancy, developing that discrepancy is really important. On in the graphic and on the left-hand side there, it says, on one hand, I want to be successful. On the other hand, all kinds of things stand in the way of making this happen. And it could just be used like, let's say that you were an admissions counselor at a college, and a person gives you all the reasons that they can't go to college. On the one hand, you want to be admitted to college, you want to go, you want to start your education. But on the other hand, you gave me all of these reasons that you can't do it. How do we do that? How do we construct this bridge across the two of them? Do you think that the people that come in my door that want to enroll in the university have no problems in their lives? They got no other issues or challenges? So they figure out a way to make this work. So help me build a bridge between the two of these things. Just some examples on the right-hand side there. It really sounds like you want to stay out of trouble. However, you still want to be associated with your old using buddies. Which one of these do you think will win out in the long run? If you're hanging out with people that you shouldn't hang out with, but you still want to be clean and stay out of trouble, which one of those do you think is going to win out in the end? So I heard you mention that being around your mother and father while they get older is important to you. How would you continuing with your criminal activities help you stay connected with your parents? You're just taking these two ideas that they've given you and reflecting it back to them. Express accurate empathy, seeing the world through the client's eyes. It does not mean that we have to agree. It does not mean that we're co-signing the behavior, but most of the things that people are seeing us for or they're in front of us for make sense in context. It doesn't mean we have to agree with it, but they make sense in context, right? My life was terrible. I had all this abuse. I had all this trauma. I started using drugs. I can see the progression. We don't have to agree with any of that stuff, but we can certainly see the progression and it makes sense, right? It makes sense in context. When clients feel understood, they are much more likely to have buy-in. That's just a fact. When they feel that empathy is present between you and them, they're much more likely to have buy-in. One of the things that's really important is getting the client to say it themselves. When people take a public stand on an issue, it just means that they're saying it out loud. When they take a stand on an issue, they're much more likely to actually do it. So if I can get somebody to say that their life would be better without drugs, or their life would be better if they were a better parent, that's a win. It's a huge win. It's different than me saying that their life would be better if without drugs, or their life would be better if they were a good parent. If they're saying it, they're taking a stand on the issue. So that one of my goals, when it should be everybody's goal, is to get the client to take that stand on it, to say that out loud. Clients become more comfortable examining ambivalence and trying to resolve it when they're working with somebody that has empathy. When they work with somebody that knows is not going to push them around the room, they're not going to wrestle with them. They're going to have empathy for them. The natural human response to change is what? Starts with an R. Resistance. The natural human response to change is resistance. If I walked in your house and went to your refrigerator, opened the refrigerator door and said, these are all the things that you can no longer eat, you're not going to be like, oh, that's great. That's awesome. You're going to have some resistance. You're going to say some things that are like, hey, you get your ideas and out. Leave my stuff alone. It's resistance. There's nothing wrong with that. There isn't. Resistance is usually precedes ambivalence in this change continuum, right? It's usually this resistance, then it's very ambivalent, and then you sort of jump on the contemplation stage. What you're dealing with has just got to be terrible. How have you been able to make it through so far? That's very empathetic. We don't have to agree with what is terrible. Their life is just whatever they just described. It's got to be terrible to deal with that. I've had folks in the past that I have supervised tell me about a session that didn't go well. Client says that they lost their mother. and they're dealing with this tragic loss of their mother. And the counselor, in an attempt to connect more with the client, says, "Man, I lost my mom too a couple of years ago, and it just, this happened and this happened." What is the problem with that? Anybody? What's the problem with the counselor saying the same thing?
It pulls the spotlight off the client.
100%. 100%. It makes it about the counselor and no longer about the client. It demeans and dishonors the experiences of the client. It doesn't matter if they had their mom passed away in the exact same fashion. And we tend to do that to connect with people. It's not from a bad spot. We do that because we think that's building some rapport. And in reality, what it's doing is it's telling me that my experience is not as important. So we think of empathy. I can express the same kind of empathy by saying, "Oh my gosh, man, that's got to be terrible. My heart goes out to you and your family. That's awful. What do you think we're going to do to help you get through this? I'm here to help. So what can I do to help you get through this?" The message is still loud and clear that I want to help. The message is still loud and clear that I have empathy. But I don't have to share my experience. I don't want to take the spotlight off of that person. I want to keep it on them. I want to be there to help. And I know a lot of my examples that I've used today are very much counselor, SUD type centered examples, but hopefully we can understand how we can apply this in our various roles. Amplify ambivalence. Recognize the ambivalence and capitalize on it without making it a negative. So a person saying something along the lines of, "I still am torn. I really want to do this still, but I understand the importance of doing this. I want to take that opportunity to amplify that, to highlight it, to underscore it." It is so awesome. It is so awesome that you recognize that this is going on in your life, Samuel. It's great. It's fantastic that you can see that there's a tough struggle going on here. Tell me some reasons that you have in your life that you want to make this change. Give me some highlights of why you want to make this change. And I'm usually going to get really great responses from him because that's change talk. I wouldn't ask the question to Samuel, "Tell me reasons why you like your old lifestyle," because that will be sustained talk. He's going to give me reasons that it's great to stay in this old lifestyle. All that's doing is helping that other side outweigh the good side. It's going to keep him stuck. It's not going to give me what I need to progress in the conversation. So I want to find out about the good side, right? Give me all the reasons that you have in your life to do good now. And I'm going to learn more about him. It's all going to be change talk, and he's going to take the public stand right in front of me on the reasons to change. Like the kid in his room with a box in his hand, packing his stuff up. When I asked him, "What would happen if you finished treatment?" Now, if I said, "Tell me about what would happen when you leave here," and he tells me about drugs, he tells me about all the things that he wants to do, is sustained talk. At that same time that I was working at that residential center, this is long before fentanyl ever was on the scene. There was a batch of heroin that was going through the community that was deadly. The newspaper that we had up there, oh, that dates me too by saying a newspaper, but there was a newspaper up there at the treatment center that was talking about this deadly batch of heroin that was in this small community and how potent it was because it had never been cut. It was almost 100% pure. And clients were reading this. What were they thinking when they were reading this? Were they thinking how dangerous it was?
No, they're thinking, "I want some of that."
Exactly. Exactly. I had people packing their stuff ready to leave. They wanted to go try it. It's counterintuitive to what you thought it would be, but everybody was thinking, "Oh my God, it's pure. I got to get out there before it's gone." So in developing that conversation with those folks, I was talking about how important it is to change these things and how important it is to change their behaviors through change talk by developing that intrinsic motivation. Because there were 4 or 5 people in my pod at that residential center that couldn't do anything other than perseverate on the heroin that was in the community that was so pure. It was just like catnip. There was no way that I could get around that. So that's really a tough thing to try to deal with and negotiate with people. But if you focus on the ambivalence and focus on the change talk, it makes things way, way easier. Questions or comments or anything so far? We doing good? I want to try to leave as much ample time as possible for questions at the very end. So if you have questions now, be sure to throw them out there. But at the very end, I want to be able to have more time for discussion, more time for questions. Rolling with resistance. Well, rolling with resistance comes in many forms and shapes. Attacking target behavior doesn't work. Attacking the person doesn't work. I know that's no surprise to anybody in this room with the work that you all do, but attacking the person or the target behavior doesn't work. The research shows that it tends to drive people further into the behavior that you don't want them to do. That's not good for them. It makes individuals really defensive, and it's not productive. So the example that I use is, I use the example because of how many times it's happened in my career. Somebody says, "Hey, I'm ready to quit meth. I'm ready to quit heroin, just not ready to quit smoking weed." What's the normal response from a counselor? "Oh, you don't understand. Marijuana is the gateway drug. All it's going to do is it's going to lead you back to heroin and meth again." I can just hear it in my head over and over and over again, right? What are they not expecting to hear? The client's not expecting to hear how great it is they're willing to give up meth and heroin. And that should be where our target is. They're making a change in a decision in their life. They're taking a public stand on it in front of me, and they're saying how they're going to get rid of these two terribly deadly things in their life. And I'm going to focus on marijuana? Not a great idea. Not a great idea. Now, understandably, there's some truth to the gateway drug and the other stuff, right? There is. But the way that I would handle it if it's my client is I would affirm everything I possibly could. Great job. Tell me about how you came to this realization. Tell me about what drove this. What changed? What shifted in your life where the focus is now on no more meth or heroin? That's fantastic. And high fives, fist bumps, great work. I wish that will you please share this in group with people tonight on how you came up with this? Because people are having a real struggle trying to get rid of those things in their lives, and your insight would be super helpful. And then when they get ready to leave my office and they have their hand on the door, I'm going to say, "Hey, I got one more question for you before you leave. What's the worst thing that would happen if you never smoked weed again for the rest of your life?" You don't have to answer that now. Just save it for the next time we meet together. When they come back, they don't have an answer. There isn't. What's the worst thing that would happen if they never smoked weed again is the only thing on their mind for the next week when it comes to coming back to see me. But there was no defensiveness when they were there because I was affirming how great it was that the decision to stop smoking meth and heroin and how important that was, right? So now they get to hear how what a great idea it was, how wonderful it was, how they're going to make such huge advancements in their lives. Which one of those, in those examples of me either beating them up, wrestling with them over the marijuana, or just affirming them, which one of those situations are more likely to actually stop smoking marijuana in the future? Obviously, if we're dancing as opposed to wrestling, right? I'm affirming them. I'm telling you what a great job it is that they're giving those things up. That's rolling with resistance. The idea behind rolling with resistance is that we will sort of push aside what we see or perceive as negative, and we'll focus on what's really going on that's positive. Seen it before working in drug court where a person had a terrible week. They had law enforcement contact. The judge is hyper-focused on the law enforcement contact. And what I stand up to remind the judge and everybody in the courtroom is they went the whole week without using. "Hey, Your Honor, I just wanted to bring up one thing real quick. Despite all that's happened with this person, despite the fact they had law enforcement contact, they were hanging out with people they shouldn't have. Do you know that little Johnny went the whole week without smoking any drugs at all? He had a clean UA. Great work. That's fantastic." And then everybody kind of shrinks down a little bit and they're like, "Yeah, that is good. We didn't really acknowledge that. That's great. Remember, that's what he's here for. Yeah, there's some stuff that happened that wasn't great, but look at what he didn't use. That's why he's here. So good job." That's rolling with resistance, right? The idea of rolling with resistance is super important because we will actually make more allies that way than we will otherwise. Let's see, what did I got here? Nope, covered it. Okay, great. Support self-efficacy. Self-efficacy is this belief that one's belief in their own ability to succeed. The client must believe that change is possible. Client must feel supported in their change. The client must feel that the relationship is present, that they also can take risks with you. If the relationship is present and you're empathetic and they feel super comfortable talking to you, they're more likely to come back. One of the things that counselors deal with all the time is the rate of no-shows. Tons and tons of people that schedule appointments and don't come back. You know, the folks that use motivational interviewing and have that at the top of their toolkit have the highest return rate of clients. If I feel really good about a session every time I leave, I'm way more likely to come back. If I look forward to talking to the person, I'm way more likely to come back. If I feel like every time I go in there, I'm benefiting, I'm getting something that I can take out with me and use today, it's a carry out intervention, I'm way more likely to come back. And it's just it shouldn't surprise, it doesn't surprise us all, but it's a fact. The last bullet at the bottom down here is good. I heard that you say that you can do whatever you put your mind to. What would happen for you? What would have to happen for you to commit to showing up to court all the time? Folks will tell us what their track record is, right? Hey, when I really wanted to master the skateboard, I figured out all the jumps and all the cool stuff that I could do with the skateboard. I'm going to remember that because I'm going to use that as an example when somebody says, hey, this getting clean stuff is hard. Okay, I understand that, man. You told me that. I get it. Everybody in this room has dealt with that. Did you do the kick flip the first time you got on a skateboard? Well, no, of course not. All right, so it's going to be tricky, right? You put a lot of effort into the skateboarding thing and look at what it did for you. Is this not going to be the same? And usually you're going to get a really positive response out of that because that's not the connection that people want to draw immediately. And everybody has some success in their life that they've done. So this will never happen. This is just a fun exercise. Using oars and deers at the same time. Nick, I understand that showing up to counseling has been a struggle for you. I must tell you, I'm impressed that you showed up today. Your effort and attendance demonstrates it might be time for a change. You feel anxious when you've been in the courtroom in the past. On the one hand, you know the damage that drugs have caused your life. On the other hand, drugs have been a part of your life for a really long time. In many ways, you are not ready to quit using. What kind of positive things would happen in your life by consistently showing up to court on time? So here's the first MI hack for you. Anytime you throw the word positive into a question, you're more likely to get change talk. So on a Friday, if I tell my group, what are you going to do this weekend? I'm likely to get a lot of different stories from adolescents, right? If I say, what positive things are you going to do this weekend? Or what positive things are you going to do to support your recovery this weekend? Then I'm going to have a real limited focus on the answers. And it's a way that you just phrase the question. And really, when we're talking about it, we're talking about perspective shift too, right? So in Lane County, when I lived in Lane County, I helped the sheriff's office get some groups off the ground in the jail. And I remember doing a motivational enhancement therapy group with a bunch of folks that were there. All volunteered to go to the class. None of them were mandated to be there. And the very first question on the worksheet was, on a scale of 1 to 10, this is a freedom scale, on a scale of 1 to 10, with 10 being as free as you can possibly be, where are you at today? Well, as you would suspect, most people said 0, 1, or 2. I had one person said a 10. And I said, let me just tell you the scale again. 0 to 10, with 10 being really free, the most freedom you could have, 0 being not free at all, where are you at? He proudly says again, a 10. I said, please tell us why you said a 10. I've got to hear this. I really want to hear this. I can't wait to hear this. And he said, Nick, when I'm on the street, I'm a slave to heroin. And when I'm in jail, I'm not. And I'll never forget that answer. You could have heard a pin drop in the room. Everybody in that room understood exactly what he was talking about. That's a hell of a perspective. You're sitting in jail and you say that you have the ultimate freedom. That's fantastic. And it took everybody kind of sat back a little bit and listened to that, because that really changes the whole perspective thing. And when I ask some of the folks that say 0, that they don't have any freedom right now, I say, actually, you do. You had freedom to come to this group, right? You had freedom to come to this class. What would happen if you punched me in the mouth right now? Do you think your freedom would stay the same? And they're like, well, no. What would happen? Well, you'd probably fight back. No, 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 I wouldn't fight back. I'm just saying, if you punched me in the mouth right now, what would happen? Well, all those deputies would come in and arrest me. And I said, then what would happen? Well, I'd get charged again. I'd probably go to segregation. And they list off all these other things that would happen. I said, would your freedom change? Well, absolutely it would. So then it would go from a zero to a what? Oh, yeah, you're right. I guess I have a little bit of freedom right now. So yeah, they're probably not going to have a sentence like this, but you can go through here and sort of pick out where the open-ended questions are, where the affirmations are, where the reflections, where the summaries are. Also, I developed some discrepancy in here. On the one hand, you can see the damage that drugs have caused in your life. On the other hand, you can see that it's time for a change. Yeah, so there's a really kind of a good way there to look at all 9 of those at the same time. How are we doing? Do we got questions, comments, concerns? I'll even entertain snide remarks at this point if you got them. Let's have it. Emily.
Yeah. How do you, this is just, if you're feeling, obviously, if I have a great idea, it's not right that I'm sharing what I think to be a great idea, because the whole point is to elicit the ideas and information from the person. But like, how do you navigate that when you're just so excited about like a great idea you have? That's my weak spot, is I want to, I realize that I'm kind of trying to get that out, or anyway, just
and it's a
thoughts about
great,
that.
fantastic question. Fantastic question. Emily, listen, I had a client a long time ago, tried X, Y, and Z.
Mhm.
And they experienced a lot of success when they tried X, Y, and Z. I wonder how that would work with you.
Mhm. Yeah.
And that's the way I would do it.
Yeah.
Because then at that point, it's this generic thing off in the distance, and I'm not focusing it on you, and I'm being inquisitive. I'm trying to get your opinion on it. And that other person may not have ever existed. I had just a really good idea that I came up with that I think would work for the person sitting in front of me.
Yeah,
But it's
way
gonna,
to float it.
yeah, it's going to hit different though.
Yeah, and really still empower them to evaluate whether they think it's a good idea or not. Yeah,
Yeah.
to put it out there. Yeah.
And they can take it or leave it at that point, right? But when I say, hey, why don't you try this?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Somebody said in similar situations, Scott, just go ahead. I'm sorry, I can't read it.
No, that's good. That's good. Yeah, I mean, pretty similar to what you ended up saying, but I had half tapped it. But I mean, in restorative dialogues, sometimes, especially if the direct victim is not participating and there's a community representative, and the facilitators have done a bunch of similar cases, and so we have a pretty good idea where a nice action plan could land, but people aren't putting forward, direct participants are not putting forward those ideas and getting movement. We train to try to like stay facilitative and really hold back. But, sometimes we sort of come in the side door with, we've dealt with some similar situations here. And what some people have tried is, X, Y, and Z. How does that kind of thing land for you? Or even more open, more like handing the judgment over to them. Like, does that sound like an appropriate kind of response to the situation that you're facing? Or
Yeah,
what about that fits and doesn't fit for you? So like kind of as soon as possible, putting it back to the power with them through those follow-up questions right away.
Yeah, that's great. It's incredible. Yeah. And it's tough. Sometimes you have situations like literally the guy with 10 DUIs. That was not a fictitious thing. That was somebody I had that had 10 DUIs. They had done prison time for their DUIs. Like no other crime in their life, but the third felony or the third DUI became a felony, right? And they had 10 of them in their lifetime. How do I tell that person if they don't understand that it's the 10 DUIs that was the problem? Right? You have to be a little bit creative, because otherwise they're going to come across as I'm the expert and you just need to listen to me because you have 10 DUIs. That's the problem. Excellent, excellent question. Anybody else? Anybody else have any questions?
Well, actually, I do. I had to step out for a call for several minutes there in the middle, but I don't remember if you talk specifically about shame and self-perception and how sometimes like just the difficulty or the pain involved in having a real honest assessment of where I'm at, the harms that I've caused, uh, the my capacity or lack of capacity. I don't know, just like um, yeah, just sort of the internal blocks to having that super honest conversation about the current situation, and just sort of how to help people come to the honest, authentic conversation, even though it's pretty painful to just say it out loud. Well,
Yeah.
here's what I was coping with, here's how I dealt with it, and now I just made a huge mess and I don't actually know how I can clean it up.
Yeah, that's great. And I think we could spend hours and hours on that question because that is systemically, it is such a problem. When you think about the way that assessments or evaluations or any of that stuff is written, it just elicits the shame, right? That's what you're asking people to bring out and bring forth. I think of how I did it in doing assessments, just a small shift and change that I made in doing assessments with somebody. In mental health or SUD assessments, it didn't matter. I had a little spiel that I ran. And it made my assessments go much faster, and I got more honest responses from people. And the way that I did it was that as soon as they sat down, I would say, listen, we're getting ready to do this assessment. Have you sat through these before? Usually it was a no or one a long time ago. And so I'm going to tell you, I'm going to give you a little preview of what's to come. I'm going to ask you a ton of really invasive questions, questions that nobody should ever ask you on the first time that they met you. Maybe not even the 20th time that they met you. But I'm going to ask you a bunch of invasive questions, probably the hardest questions you've ever been asked. I'm not going to ask you follow-up questions about them. So there's going to be questions that were you physically abused? Were you sexually abused? My hope is that you can be super honest and just say yes or no. You don't have to go into details about it because the way that our treatment plan is not going to make any difference whether you say yes and all of this bad stuff behind it or just yes. But I'm going to give you a notepad and a paper, a piece of paper and a pen, a notepad and a pen. And if something that we're talking about triggers something for a future discussion, I want you to write it down because today it's about the assessment, but every session that we have in the future is about you and about what you want to talk about. Today is going to feel like it's all about me, and I'd just rather not do this. But this is something that we need to do for insurance purposes, for being able to come up with a good treatment plan. But if I ask you a question that's really tough, just if you could just give me a yes or no, and I won't ask any follow-up. And usually you can see some weight come off of people because they're expecting that I'm going to get into this big, long dialogue about the abuse and that we're going to have this goodwill hunting moment, and all that. And it's just not the way that it works, right? But my assessments would go much faster. I would have a lot better idea behind it because I was trying to change what systemically was so terrible about assessments and evaluations. And counselors that I had supervised get lost in that stuff. People get on this problem saturated narrative where it's just like, and then this happened, and then this happened, and then this happened, and they don't want to be disrespectful and cut them off, but you're an hour and a half into the same question because they're relaying all of these terrible events that have happened in their life that gets them to this point. I think that with the shame piece, especially, it helps when folks know that they're not going to have to get into great detail about that, that they can just focus on the yeses or the nos, and we can move past and move through it. The other thing that's really helpful with shame and self-perception is to normalize what they're going through. And I think that's a critical piece, that you're not alone. In fact, every person that's ever sat in that chair right there has had the exact same thing. They feel terrible about what they've done. They've made these decisions. They want to make these changes, and here's what they're going to do moving forward. And no matter what you're dealing with, as far as shame or self-perception, I'm here to help you through that. Our team is here to help you through that. One of the values of having groups, mental health groups or SUD groups where there's multiple peers, is to hear from other people that the craziness that they're dealing with is the same craziness that you're dealing with. And I mean craziness and not in a disparaging way, but like just the things that happen when you have to make these changes in your lives and the way that you feel and how you feel like you want to go use drugs and you're triggered to go do X, Y, or Z and you feel awful for that. But everybody in your group is shaking their head yes because they've experienced the exact same thing, right? It sort of normalizes it again. I hope that did something for an answer. I know it probably wasn't perfect, but I hope it did something. Great question. and you will see a new TED Talk. No, I'm kidding. Uh, lots of future hours could be put aside to that one. That's a great question. Anybody else? Okay, good. We'll still have plenty of time for questions here in a second. So one of the last acronyms that we're going to discuss today, because this is just the sort of the basic training, is PACE. It's PACE, the last acronym. And PACE stands for Partnership, Acceptance, Compassion, and Evocation. So partnership is this idea that I am not the expert, but we're partnering in this thing. We're working on this thing together. I might have some initials or letters after my name, but that's not for you. That's for me, right? You're the expert in your life. All I'm here to do is just help you along your journey. I'm not here to tell you how to do it. I'm not here to force you how to do it, but we're partners in this. Acceptance, you remember hearing about unconditional positive regard in your lifetimes, I'm sure, but that idea that I don't have to agree with you, I don't have to co-sign your behavior, I don't have to think it was a good behavior, but I can certainly have acceptance for who you are today, right? I can certainly help you through this and work with you to get through this. And that comes in the form of accurate empathy, allowing them autonomy and affirming where they're at today. Compassion sort of goes without saying, actively promote where the person is, give priority to their needs, genuinely value the well-being of the person. Those are all things that we want, whether we're seeking a friendship with somebody or we're seeking counseling or no matter what it is we're seeking, we want to have those things. We want to have that acceptance. And then evoking from the patient or from the person their own motivation to change, their own resources for decision making. I can come up with a really great list of reasons and ways how, like what Emily was just saying a second ago, I can come up with a list of 10 things while the person's still talking about stuff that would help their life. But if they're my ideas and the person doesn't like them, then it's just puffs of air, right? They're not going to listen to it. And if they feel like you're imposing your value, then even if it was a good idea, they're not going to listen to it. And I think back to when I was making all the terrible mistakes in my life, somebody could have been standing in front of me telling me that if I went left, I was going to run into a lot of problems. I'd be like, all right, see ya, going right, right? Or going left. I'd go against everything they said just because they told me to. It was just me being defiant or not trusting, but that it was never proposed in a way that would have been like, you have a couple of choices here. You can go left or you can go right. So we're evoking this intrinsic motivation. And I don't care what the motivation could be. It could be because of Aunt Matilda. It doesn't make any difference. If they tell me about Aunt Matilda, how she's been a great support, she lives in another state, I want to write that down. I want to make it part of their plan. I want to remind them about Aunt Matilda. I want to put it in their relapse prevention plan or their safety plan or their case plan or whatever it is that we're working on. Because when people are down and out and they're having a terrible time in their life, they're seldom to remember Aunt Matilda. I want to be able to help them remember those things. So if you look over here on the right-hand side of your screen, you see the little tiny spot of this Venn diagram right here in the middle, where all of these layers converge here. That is right where the spirit of motivational interviewing is. And if you only remembered that one thing today, that'll be the key. When you have all of those things going on with the person that you're working with or the people that you're working with, that's when the greatest work happens. That's where the spirit of motivational interviewing is. And at no point in time anywhere does it talk about your qualifications as a professional or your role or what you have to push or your values that you're imposing on somebody. These are all just areas right here of partnership where we're evoking this change talk. We have this acceptance or this unconditional regard for the person and compassion. That is it for the presentation. There's my email address, or I could stay on the call, or I'm happy to give you, let me just put my phone number in the chat here. If you'd like to reach out, you're more than welcome to text, phone call, email. Just don't give it to clients, please. It's my personal number. But please feel free to text or call, carrier pigeons, Pony Express, whatever. It doesn't matter. You can get a message to me. I'm happy to help in any way that I possibly can. And if you got questions, we got 11 minutes, so I'm happy to talk about whatever. I guess the last thing that I would say is motivational interviewing being ahead of its time. Now more than ever, we're in the substance use disorder field and mental health. We're dealing with a drug that kills people immediately, the first time they use it. It is so important that every interaction we have with somebody, we can get some change talk going immediately. I don't know if there's going to be a second session. So when I'm talking to somebody or I'm teaching counselors how to be better counselors, today is the day. You have somebody sitting in front of you, make that change today. Try to figure out a way to pull forward every possible change that that person wants to make, because you don't know if there's going to be a second opportunity to meet with them. And when we look at it like that we have this unpredictable, whether we can meet with that person a second time or not, then time is of the essence, right? We got to do something today. We got to make sure that happens today. Questions?